Hello, everyone. Tonight, we are going far, really far into a place your mind probably doesn't associate with dinosaurs. Forget the Sahara. Forget the jungles of South America. Picture instead a world of moss-choked air-dusky trees that lean at strange angles in sunlight that refuses to set. That's right. You're standing in an ancient Arctic swamp. It's late Cretaceous, and you, my brave insomniac, are definitely underdressed. There's no ice here. Not yet. Not like the kind you've seen in documentaries with walruses and penguins. This is a lush, soggy forest that hugs the top of the world. The temperature is cool but not freezing. Ferns carpet the floor. Giant conifers soar above their bark, soft and fragrant. A mist snakes between the roots, and somewhere not far off you hear the squelch of footsteps. Big ones. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I do here. Post your location and your local time below. Let's see how far we've wandered tonight. Now, turn off the lights, maybe turn on the fan for some soothing noise, and let's get started tonight. You shuffle along a path that hasn't been walked in 70 million years. The mud is thick, suctioning to your ankles with each step. Strange, isn't it, how quiet it is? No bird song, just a slow, occasional dripping, like something melting. Overhead, the sky is an overcast dome lit from beneath. The sun won't set for another month. Or rise. Hard to say. Up here, day and night are more like suggestions. The first thing you notice is how alive everything smells. Damp pine, mushrooms, sweet rotting wood. There's a strange cinnamon-like scent carried on the breeze, and for a second you imagine this place might be cozy, like some ridiculous prehistoric spa. And then the ground shifts slightly under your step and you remember this place is very much alive. A dragonfly the size of a child's forearm buzzes past your face and you instinctively duck. You try not to squeal. Too late. But nothing comes for you. Whatever made that squelching noise earlier seems uninterested in a sweaty time traveler with questionable footwear. Here in the polar latitudes of the late Cretaceous, life has found ways to bend. The angle of the trees, the thickness of the underbrush, the low croaking sounds that rise from the reeds, all of it feels just tilted, like the earth leaned a bit too far and forgot to correct itself. Suddenly, you come to a clearing, a shallow basin with dark, wet soil, and there, in the center of it all, are the tracks. Perfectly preserved. Dozens of them, all leading in concentric rings. They don't go anywhere. They don't chase. They don't scatter. They dance. You freeze, suddenly aware that you're not the first to witness this. Not even close. These footprints have been studied by real paleontologists like the ones at the Prince Creek Formation in Alaska, who have been puzzled by patterns just like this. Large herbivores walking in continuous circles, sometimes for hours, sometimes for days. One theory, social bonding, another, display rituals. And yes, some still argue it might have just been poor navigation, but when you're here standing in the eerie quiet of this polar swamp, it's hard not to feel like you've stumbled into a rehearsal for something sacred. Far off, a shape moves between the trees. You duck behind a fallen log, breath catching. It's big, definitely not alone, and it's making that same soft squelch. The mud loves them, keeps their secrets. But you see enough, a duck-billed hadrosaur crest bobbing gently, stepping with deliberation. Then another, and another. They move slowly, heads swaying slightly, tails dragging faint grooves behind them. No urgency, no alarm, just rhythm. Somewhere in your mind, a memory stirs the sight of cranes dancing in winter fields or flamingos stepping in synchrony. The same biological urge to move together, to feel together. Here it is again, just a few million years earlier. Historians still debate whether these animals danced as mating rituals or whether they simply moved to stay warm. Some think the circle kept predators guessing. Others believe the movement itself was the message, a way of being, that spoke louder than sound. A beetle with shimmering wings lands on your arm and you don't brush it off. The sensation anchors you here. You're not just watching anymore. You're participating, however clumsily. Then the light dims just slightly and you realize the sun is dipping behind a wall of distant trees. It doesn't set not exactly, but it hides long enough to cast strange shadows. The mist thickens, and still the dancers move. It's not a frenzy, it's a lullaby. Each heavy step presses into the mud with the weight of memory. These weren't dumb animals. They navigated darkness and seasons. They knew when to move and when to wait. And here in this basin of silence, they chose to repeat a single loop. Over and over and over. Maybe they were marking territory, maybe they were mourning. Or maybe it was just what you did in the swamp, where the sun never set and the earth never stopped listening. The next morning, not that you can tell, begins with a fog that clings to your eyelashes. The light hasn't changed. You check your watch, but it's useless here. Time loops just like the footprints. Still, something in the air has shifted. The dancers are gone, but their prints remain. All those ovals and loops pressed into the muck like a message no one knows how to read. You walk along the edge of the basin. Some of the impressions are so crisp you can make out the ripple of skin patterns, the drag of a toe, a tiny slip where one foot must have landed wrong. They walk slowly, repetitively, but they weren't perfect. Even ancient rituals had off days. Paleontologists have mapped fossil trackways like these from sites in Alaska and northern Canada. Some spiraled. Others ran in loops so regular you'd think someone had choreographed them. And maybe someone or something did. The fossil record doesn't always show teeth and bones. Sometimes it shows habits repeated over generations. As you lean in to trace the edge of one print with your finger, you realize the tracks aren't evenly spaced. Some are deeper, some overlap, some start to spiral inward like a whirlpool. It's not chaos, but it isn't clockwork either. Now imagine this, a herd of hadrosaurs, those big, flat-beaked social herbivores gathering in circles around a central point. No predator, no migration, just movement. Maybe this basin was a known gathering site. A memory passed on. We walk here. In this place, in this pattern. The way your ancestors might have returned to a church or a grove or a cafe with free Wi-Fi and decent coffee. One odd fact: bees also dance in circles to communicate food sources. They literally spin in figure eights to say, hey, nectar this way. Not saying hadrosaurs were bees, but maybe communication didn't need roars or songs. Maybe it just needed a stomp. You step into the ring now, following one of the cleaner loops. The mud squishes underfoot and a mosquito the size of a quarter zips by your ear. You don't slap it. That would be rude. You're in someone else's ballroom. There's a rhythm to it. One foot, then the other. Keep your balance. Let the shoulders sway. You imagine the crests of the hadrosaurs bobbing to the beat. Some of them had those big hollow tubes like Parasaurolophus, which scientists believe may have worked like trumpets. Resonant chambers to project low sounds over long distances. So now the image changes, not just a silent march, but a low, deep hum rising from the herd. A soft chorus carried through the soil felt more than heard. You pause. The sound is gone, but the idea sticks. Back in the real world, researchers are still puzzled. These loops don't match feeding behavior. They aren't random like panic. And they occur in places that would have been cold, dark, and frankly hard to dance in. Which leads to a big question: why? One theory: thermal regulation. By walking in slow circles, large animals could keep their bodies warm, maintain blood flow, and gently wake their hatchlings from torpor. Or it could be a form of dominance display, or courtship, or collective trance. Honestly, pick your flavor of scientific debate, there's no consensus. You break out of the circle and walk further toward a downed tree tangled with fungus. On its trunk you see smaller prints. 3 toes. Narrow stride. Maybe a juvenile. Or maybe a different species altogether. Troodon. Tiny tyrannosaurid. Something about it seems out of place. These tracks don't loop. They meander. They hesitate. Then you see it a claw mark gouged across the bark. Not deep, but deliberate. Predators probably watched these dances, maybe even stalked them. But fossil evidence suggests they didn't often interrupt. Why maybe attacking during the dance was taboo? Or maybe this is weirdly comforting, they were just confused. Imagine being a small raptor watching 50 massive hadrosaurs spin and sink like a dinosaur conga line. Do you go for it? Or do you back into the ferns and rethink your life choices? You move back toward the looped prints. Even now you can't walk through them without feeling you're trespassing. That's the thing about ancient rituals, you don't have to understand them to know they mattered. A chill wind drifted through the trees, and for the first time since you arrived, you hear a branch snap in the distance. Not a twig, something big, something that isn't looping. Maybe the hadrosaurs weren't the only ones performing here. But you're not afraid. Not yet. Not here. This basin with its looping print and moist breath of cinnamon ferns has a peace to it. A kind of forgotten grace. And somehow, despite the questions, despite the fact that scientists still haven't cracked the code, you believe the circle was never meant to be solved. Only experienced. Like a waltz played for no one. The fog lifts slightly, not all at once, but enough to make out the silhouettes moving across the far side of the swamp. You freeze, but they don't seem to notice you. Or maybe they don't care. After all, you're not the one stomping in circles, humming through your nose holes and swaying like a 70-million-year-old metronome. There's a lull. Then a subtle sound, not a roar, not a shriek, more like the deep blare of a foghorn muffled under moss. It starts low and rises just enough to rattle your ribs. Then another one answers slightly out of sync. And another. Now they're calling to each other in layered waves of infrasonic sound. Imagine whale songs designed for trees instead of water. You crouch near a fern, barely breathing as they emerge fully into view. A herd of hadrosaurs, broad-backed, beaked with crests that catch the light like old bronze. They don't walk like elephants, they move more like dancers, mid-routine steady, aware of the choreography coordinated. They sway left, then right. Then one stamps purposefully. You'd swear there's a rhythm to it. The hadrosaur family was full of variety. Edmontosaurus, Corythosaurus, Lambeosaurus, some plain, some with headgear, like parade floats. But what united them was motion. They didn't just migrate or flee, they performed. And if these trackways tell the truth, they did it together. One female larger than the others, Oschisers, with a prominent crest shaped like a curled leaf, takes the lead. She steps into the inner ring and begins circling counterclockwise. The others follow. Within minutes, the clearing fills with movement, and not a single one looks back. Your modern brain tries to assign logic. Is this dominant behavior a prelude to mating, or just a way to stretch sore joints after sleeping, standing up all night? But then something else strikes you. None of them seem anxious. There's no tail lashing, no frantic head turning, no thunder of hooves. Just calm. They're not fleeing. They're dancing. The ground shakes slightly under your feet as they move. Soft pulses like bass notes buried beneath soil. This might be what some paleontologists call seismic signaling, a type of communication where sound isn't heard but felt. Elephants do it, moles do it, even some frogs. So why not hadrosaurs? It's a surreal thing watching 10-ton creatures communicate by choreography. You picture one of them muttering, "Just follow my lead," before starting the first step. And in a strange way, it doesn't feel impossible. We're wired for rhythm, so maybe they were too. The sun hasn't moved. But the shadows have stretched. The mist recedes into the trunks, and light beams filter down through ancient branches like spotlights on a stage. One hadrosaur raises its head and lets out a long, low note. Another answers with two shorter ones. Then silence. All at once they freeze. Just as quickly as it began, the circle dissolves. The herd scatters, not in panic, but as if called away to another part of the swamp. One by one, they vanish into the trees. You're alone again. You walk out into this clearing, almost afraid to step on the fresh prints. They're wide and deep and already pooling slightly with water. Some tracks overlap older ones, tracing paths that were laid centuries ago. It's like watching footprints on a dance floor that never got wiped clean. In places like Alaska's Colville River or Canada's polar sites, fossil trackways show the same curious behavior, hadrosaurs returning to the same locations seasonally, even annually. Their prints layer like stories, one generation mimicking the one before. Historians still debate whether this points to migratory memory or true cultural learning. Did they pass down traditions? Or did the environment nudge them into these patterns by necessity? You run your hand over the trunk of a fallen cycad. It's cold and sticky with resin. A beetle crawls out of a crevice and disappears under a patch of fungus. Somewhere in the distance, a branch cracks again, but still no threat appears. You sit. Right there in the mud. You watch the prints and replay the dance in your mind. Imagine growing up in a herd like this, learning not from instruction but from imitation. Your first real memory. Following your parents as they pace the edge of this circle. No need to ask why. You just knew that walking in loops meant something important. It's the same reason kids spin in circles today, shrieking with laughter until they fall over. There's something ancient in the urge to turn in place. Something that says, look, I'm here. I exist. And this is how I move through the world. The wind shifts again. You smell something sweet, resin maybe, or the decay of some fallen fruit. It's not unpleasant. It smells old, honest. You rise, brush the dirt off your hands, and take one last look at the prints. They're already beginning to fade. The swamp doesn't hold its past forever. It presses down, buries, preserves. But only if you know where to look. You step backward out of the ring and feel a strange pressure lift. Like you've left a room where something sacred just happened, and you're not sure if you were supposed to witness it. Well, too late now. You saw it. They danced. And tomorrow, they might again. You follow the herd's path as best you can, although path might be too generous a word. It's more like a suggestion. Faint depressions in the peat, snapped ferns, and an occasional waft of something warm and earthy that says, yes, they were here. The undergrowth thickens, but not in the way tropical jungles do. It's more lichen and moss-fibrous vines hanging limp in needles that fall from conifers in slow motion, as if gravity is gentler in this place. And here's something funny. You're sweating. Not a lot, but enough to feel it under your collar. Because despite the latitude, despite being so far north, you might as well high-five a polar star. This swamp is warm. Not tropic warm, not even summer warm, but warm enough to confuse every instinct in your body. Where's the snow? Where's the frost? You feel betrayed by every map you've ever trusted. The Cretaceous Arctic was no tundra. Back then, the world was in a greenhouse phase. No polar ice caps, high sea levels, carbon dioxide through the roof. The North Pole was blanketed not in glaciers but in forests. Lush, tangled, dripping forests. Imagine Vancouver had a baby with a mangrove swamp and gave it an endless day. You step around a fallen log slick with ancient slime and spot the herd again. They've stopped in a wide patch of ferns, seemingly grazing. Some kneel on their forelimbs to get at the tender shoots. Others stand tail swaying like lazy metronomes. One flicks its head and lets out that same foghorn groan from earlier. It's a bass note for no one but the trees. This warm Arctic was no paradise, though. It came with a twist, 6 months of daylight followed by 6 months of darkness. Imagine trying to eat, grow, and raise children in a world where the sun forgets how to set, and then just as suddenly forgets how to rise. Even the ferns look confused, growing sideways like they're reaching for a light they can't quite locate. And here's where it gets interesting. The hadrosaurs didn't migrate south for winter. At least not all of them. Fossil evidence shows that some species stayed put, braving the dark and cold instead of walking thousands of kilometers toward more stable climates. Scientists still debate whether they hibernated or just adapted to limited resources. Some suggest they slowed down their metabolisms like bears. Others think they simply ate less and shivered more. Personally, you're just amazed anything this big ever decided to tough out an Arctic winter. Makes you feel like a bit of a wimp, honestly. You crouch behind a cluster of tree ferns and watch as two juveniles play, if that's the right word. They chase each other in wide circles, occasionally bumping, letting out breathy honks. One trips belly flops and stays there, legs in the air until the other nudges it. They're practicing something. Maybe the dance, maybe just balance, or maybe they're goofing off like bored kids in math class. The adults seem unimpressed. A few lift their heads but go back to chewing. The mossy floor squishes under their weight. You notice how every movement is careful. No wasted steps. They're conserving energy like marathon runners pacing for the long haul. And then something stranger than dinosaurs happens. A breeze passes through the forest and the trees move. In unison. Not just swaying, not just reacting to wind. They creak together. A long, low hum rises as trunks bend and branches quiver. It's like the forest itself is sighing. You'd laugh, but the sound is so beautiful it shuts your brain off for a second, just long enough to feel small in the best way possible. Odd fact of the night, some trees communicate. Today's aspens do it chemically, sending danger signals through root systems. And certain pine species react to vibrations. If modern plants can talk, maybe these ancient ones could hum back. The whole swamp becomes a living instrument, dinosaurs. The drummers, trees, the strings. You don't know if the hadrosaurs notice, but none of them move. They let the forest sing. Somewhere nearby, water drips from a high branch into a puddle. Plunk, plunk. The rhythm returns. The pulse of this strange, sweaty, evergreen world. You realize something else. This is a place of extremes. Heat in the wrong hemisphere. Day that doesn't end. A herd that dances, not flees. And all of it stitched together by something larger than logic. You wonder how often they did this, once a year, once a generation. Maybe more? Fossilized trackways suggest repeated use. Same location, same formation, over and over. If this were a human site, archaeologists would call it ceremonial. Sacred. But because it's dinosaurs, people hesitate to say the word. That's a shame. Because standing here watching a juvenile nudge its friend back into a spiral, it's hard to believe this wasn't ritual. Or at the very least, tradition. The mist returns, just a little, enough to blur the treetops. You notice your own breath now, which you hadn't seen all day. The warmth is fading. Evening, maybe. Or the swamp's telling you something. You take one last look at the grazing herd, turn slowly, and follow a trail of soft indentations left in the moss. The trackways form a wide figure 8 that crosses through a patch of gnarled underbrush, then bends sharply toward the basin again. They've done this before, and you're beginning to understand why. You're not even surprised anymore when the ground trembles under your feet like a soft drum roll. By now, you expect it. You even lean into it, toes spreading slightly to feel the low-frequency rhythm travel up your legs, like someone whispering directly into your bones. You're standing on what used to be the forest floor of a Cretaceous Arctic swamp, but it may as well be a concert hall. Because that trembling, it's not an earthquake. It's not a passing stampede. It's a song. A strange, deep, ground-born hum produced not by lungs or throats, but by stomping feet and hollow crests. You follow the vibrations. They're not sharp, more like waves on a lake. Each one rolls into the next, and you find yourself walking in time, which is hilarious, considering you have zero sense of rhythm back home. But here in a forest where dinosaurs drum the dirt to talk, even your awkward steps seem to sink. Hadrosaurs had specialized nasal passages and elaborate crests, some of them so ridiculous they'd make a unicorn jealous. Parasaurolophus had a crest that curved like a backward French horn. Scientists believe it connected to their respiratory system, allowing them to produce deep, resonant calls, ones you could hear across kilometers. But what if you didn't hear them? What if you felt them instead? Infrasound sound waves below the range of human hearing is used by elephants, whales, even pigeons. It travels farther than regular sound, especially through dense environments like forests. The idea that dinosaurs could have used it to communicate is more than speculation, it's a growing field of study. And here in this fossilized sound studio, you're starting to get why. You reach a clearing ringed by rocks. The ground is matted with old impressions, some faint, some still sharp. It's like a record pressed into the mud. You stand in the center and wait. And there it is again. Thump. Pause. Thump, thump. You blink. Could they have danced and sung at the same time? A hadrosaur steps out from the tree line. Alone. Its crest glows slightly under the weird half-light. It pauses, lowers its head, and exhales through its snout. The sound isn't loud, it's not meant for ears, but you feel it. It pulses through the moss like the note of a tuba buried 6 feet under. You imagine a herd doing this in unison. 30–40 tons of pressure pulsing into the earth. The mud becomes a medium. The ground becomes a speaker. If you were a dinosaur nearby, you wouldn't just hear it, you'd feel the message vibrate your chest. There's even evidence that some dinosaur bones had hollow cavities that could have amplified sound internally, not unlike the resonance chambers in certain birds and reptiles today. That's right, you might have been walking around with a built-in subwoofer. Historians still debate whether this was true acoustic coordination or just lucky evolution. But here's the thing, standing where you are with your chest gently thudding in sync with something long extinct. It feels intentional. The hadrosaur snorts again and disappears into the mist. No rush, just done with it solo apparently. You wander past the stone circle and find another depression in the ground, shallower than the rest, but lined with smooth stones, and in the middle a long flat rock with deep scratches across its surface. You crouch. The scratches aren't random, they're parallel angled, some old, some newer. Were they made by claws, horns, or were they etched by movement repeated rhythmic, perhaps ritualistic? It hits you this might have been the stage, or an altar, or a drum. Odd fact. Some non-human animals today, like cockatoos and sea lions, can perceive and even recreate beats. In other words, they dance. They feel tempo. There's no reason to assume that skill is uniquely human. You sit on the edge of the platform, let your hand rest on the stone. It's cold, but not dead. The kind of cold that remembers things. A breeze kicks up again, and this time it carries something unexpected, peppery, astringent, almost metallic. You follow it with your nose sniffing like a truffle pig, until you find the source, a sapling twisted and low-leaking amber. Not just amber resin with insect husks inside. Beetles caught mid-wriggle. Time capsules with legs. You reach out, but something makes you stop. This swamp isn't just a home. It's a recording device. A memory palace built in mud and resin. The dinosaurs weren't just surviving here, they were performing, transmitting, leaving instructions. And maybe, just maybe, the dance was the code. You lie back for a moment, eyes half closed, and let the low-frequency hum lull you. There's something ancient and weirdly comforting about seismic communication. You can't misunderstand it. There's no accent, no mispronunciation, just force and intent. Boom. I'm here. Boom. You're not alone. You think about how lonely we are now. All that technology, all those words, and we still misread each other constantly. Maybe the dinosaurs had it right. Maybe a good stomp in the mud meant more than any long-winded speech. The vibrations start up again, faint, from somewhere deeper in the swamp. This time they come in threes. Thump, thump, thump. You smile. Because whether it's a signal, an accident, or the ghost of an ancient concert, one thing is absolutely clear. The ground is still listening. By now, time has completely given up on you. The sun hasn't shifted. The light still glows with that pale gold glaze, not quite warm but not cold either, like the inside of a candle flame. You should be exhausted, but instead you feel tuned in, like some part of you finally matched the rhythm of this place. Not the hours on a clock, but the hours in your bones. And that's good, because what's coming next is going to mess with every circadian instinct you've got. You keep walking north, or what feels like north, into a part of the forest where the canopy begins to close in. The trees grow taller here, their trunks braided with moss that hangs like green fur. Ferns become sparse, replaced by tough-leaved shrubs that snap under your steps. The air thickens. Even the light seems muffled, as if it's had enough of trying to be useful. Then you notice something. It's quiet, too quiet. No humming, no rustling, no hadrosaur lullabies. You stop, wait, listen, and then it hits you. This is the part of the Arctic year when the sun never fully sets. The perpetual twilight stretches for weeks, then months, and eventually gives way to something far worse, darkness that doesn't end. Right now, you're between those two extremes. The light is thinning, and your brain is not okay with it. Modern humans use light for everything. Navigation, safety, mood. But up here in the Cretaceous Arctic, light was optional. The animals here lived in cycles of glowing monotony followed by choking black. How did they cope? You squat near a rotting log, pick up a chunk of soft bark and toss it aside. Beneath it, a scuttle of insects the size of kittens scatter into the soil. Lovely. But it proves the point life kept moving even when the light didn't. Some researchers believe that hadrosaurs and other Arctic dinosaurs had specialized eyesight extra rods for low light like owls. Others think they leaned on different senses, smell vibration, memory. Historians still debate whether the Arctic dinos had permanent adaptations or if they simply endured the extremes season after season, generation after generation. You inch forward and suddenly see it. A dome. Not a structure exactly, more like a shallow depression in the mud partially filled with moss and ice shards, ringed with claw marks and a single spine-like feather poking up from the center. It looks like a nest, but too big, too purposeful. You step inside. The air is cooler here just by a few degrees, cold enough to make your skin tighten, cold enough to make you question how anything warm-blooded survived here. And yet they did. Some paleontologists suggest that Arctic hadrosaurs were warm-blooded or at least had fast metabolisms. Evidence from bone growth rings like tree rings but in femurs shows that they didn't stop growing even during the dark months. That means they didn't hibernate. They thrived. You lie down inside the dome. It's surprisingly soft. A bed of pine needles compressed over time. You imagine a herd circling it in the months when the sun finally gave up. Maybe they huddled here for warmth, or protection, or just because they remembered it felt safe. Above you, the trees creak in that eerie musical way. It's the only sound now. You wonder what happened when the darkness stretched past comfort. Did the dances continue? Were there moonlight performances? Or did they shift to something quieter? No stomping, just presence. You feel the whisper of something against your arm and jolt. It's a feather. Thin, almost translucent, curved like a quill. Not from a bird, from something older. You look up and catch a flicker between the branches, small, fast, light-footed. Troodontid. Likely, feathers, big eyes, curious. Potentially warm-blooded too based on their bone structure. You've heard the phrase Arctic raptor before and now it makes sense. The troodontid tilts its head and vanishes. No sound, no drama. Like it was checking on you. You sit up slowly. The dome feels more alive now. Not just a structure, but a memory. Maybe a communal site used year after year. Odd fact. In modern reindeer populations, scientists have documented generational memory of calving grounds, even when the landscape shifts. Could dinosaurs have done the same? Could they have passed knowledge not in words but in walks? You step out of the depression and notice a trail of fresh prints, small, sharp-clawed, winding around the edge of the dome like someone circling a sleeping giant. You follow it. As you do, the trees open slightly, and the light changes again, not brighter, but cooler, bluer. You can't explain it. It's as if the air itself has leaned closer to shadow. And that's when you realize something quietly horrifying. You don't remember the last time you saw the sun. Not just today, you mean it all. This twilight, it's been going on longer than it should. Maybe hours, maybe days. You check your watch again. It's blinking. Frozen. Great. Technology always bails right when you need it. But then as your eyes adjust, something else comes into focus. Around you, the trees are marked. Scratches, claw trails, some high, some low, symbols, messages, or just creatures stretching. Historians still debate whether these markings were deliberate communication or just wear and tear. But some patterns repeat: crossed lines, spirals, loops. Circles again. Everywhere you go in this place, it comes back to circles. You spin slowly in place, trying to make sense of the markings. But the swamp offers no answers, only questions draped in fog and pine. A low hum begins again. Not from the ground this time, but from above. Wind, gnome. It vibrates too evenly, like a frequency being tested, then lost. You take a deep breath and it tastes different now. Earthy, bitter, real. You've entered the dark stretch. The sun's gone. The dinosaurs aren't. And you're not just observing anymore. You're part of the pattern. You don't know how long you've been walking when you first spot them, slender shadows lurking just beyond the tree line. Not hadrosaurs this time. These are leaner, tighter, built like knives with feathers. They move with intention, pausing between steps, heads, low tails stiff. Predators. You duck behind a cluster of tree trunks, their bark slick and fragrant with resin. From this low vantage, you count at least 3 of them, raptor-like shapes, each no taller than your hip but with long claws that tap the ground in slow, deliberate beats. You can almost hear them thinking, "They haven't noticed you yet. You should stay quiet." Still, maybe even back away. But of course you don't. Instead, you watch. Because something about the way they move isn't quite right. They're not stalking, not pouncing, not even hunting. They're circling. But not in the usual predatory pattern. Not like wolves or lions, or those horror movies where the flashlight starts flickering. No. They're circling a spot in the mud. A place where the ground is dark or sunken, marked with older prints. It's a footprint ring. Just like the ones from the hadrosaur basin, only smaller. You peer closer and realize what you're looking at: a predator circle, or maybe a mirror circle. They're mimicking the hadrosaurs. Historians still debate whether predatory dinosaurs observed herbivore behavior with any sort of curiosity. We know many modern predators do: coyotes watching deer, lions watching elephants, even cats watching humans. But this looks ritualistic. One of them lets out a short, raspy sound, not a growl, not a chirp, something between. Another responds with a click from its throat. They resume their slow tread, 3 of them now pacing a nearly perfect loop. Are they rehearsing, practicing, or mocking? Or is it something else entirely? Something no one ever thought to look for. You remain crouched, heart thudding, as the 3 predators stop in unison. For a moment, nothing moves. Then, with eerie calm, they each step out of the circle one by one and vanish into the swamp. No chase, no violence. You wait another few minutes before approaching the ring. The prints are clear, 3-toed narrow talon marks deep at the tip. Definitely not hadrosaur, definitely carnivore, but organized. Intentional. You kneel beside them. The soil is warm here, damp and oddly sticky. As you press your hand to one of the impressions, you feel that same low pulse you've come to recognize. A rhythm embedded into the earth. The predators knew the beat. Now, here's an odd fact: some birds today, especially parrots and corvids, can imitate other animals, not just sounds, behaviors. There are reports of crows mimicking traffic sounds. Even wolves have been observed watching and mimicking the behavior of prey species to anticipate patterns. So maybe what you just saw wasn't ritual, maybe it was rehearsal, or respect, or something between the two. You wander beyond the ring, deeper into a grove where the trees stretch higher and the underbrush grows sparse. The light is dim now, not because of time, but because the canopy is pressing together like a heavy blanket. Every few steps you hear the faint drip of condensation hitting leaves. A constant, natural metronome. Then you hear the sound again, not from behind, from ahead. A low groaning call, deep, trembling, and not alone. You step forward and appear through a gap in the trees. And there they are again, the hadrosaurs. Not the same group you think. These ones are older, bigger, some with scars on their sides and moss growing along their flanks like patches on an old coat. They're huddled, not circling, but around them like sentinels on patrol. Smaller carnivores move in slow arcs. This isn't a hunt, it's a vigil. You step closer, careful not to snap a twig, and realize one of the hadrosaurs is lying down, still, breathing shallowly, sick, dying. The others hum low and constant, no variation, just tone. The predators don't intervene. They don't even seem tense. They're observant. And you remember something you once read in some species: wolves, elephants, even whales. Predators and prey display behaviors around death that suggest more than instinct. Something like mourning. Could that be what you're witnessing? Historians still debate whether dinosaurs had social behaviors complex enough to include grief. But the evidence is mounting. Herd structures, nesting grounds, and now this, a half-circle of herbivores surrounding a fallen member. Predators nearby, not striking but watching. It challenges everything you've been taught about nature being red in tooth and claw. Because here in this Arctic swamp, death isn't chaos. It's choreography. The moment stretches, the hums grow fainter, the air grows thicker, and you crouched in the brush feel strangely honored to have witnessed it. Eventually, the sounds stop. One by one, the hadrosaurs rise and leave. The predators too, and the fallen one remains. You step into the clearing, wind brushing gently against your skin, and for the first time the cold bites just a little. The circle is gone, but the echo remains. At some point the light shifts again, not toward brightness but toward clarity. The mist thins, the air sharpens, and suddenly, everything has an edge. The bark seems rougher, the ferns more brittle. Even the silence has a bite to it, like it's been sharpened overnight. And speaking of night, this might be it, or at least the beginning of it. Because here in the far north of the Cretaceous, you've stumbled into that uncanny in-between where daylight finally collapses after months of stubborn refusal. The sun doesn't fall dramatically, it just fades. One moment you're in a golden, hazy world of perpetual almost day, and the next everything is gray-blue and cold enough to bite through your sleeves. You don't panic. You just breathe and watch your breath plume out in front of you like steam from an old kettle. Your body is suddenly very aware that it's in the wrong climate, wrong time period, wrong everything. The swamp is transitioning. No more warmth, no more cicadas buzzing lazily. No more hadrosaur lullabies or echoing stomps. Just frost, blooming on the edges of fern leaves like glittering mold. It's beautiful, and it's dangerous. Because when the cold truly arrives, it doesn't knock, it seeps. You reach out and touch a nearby tree trunk. Your fingertips come away damp, sticky with resin, and chilled. The warmth has drained from the bark. Above you, a sheet of wind cuts across the canopy, triggering a chain reaction. The trees groan, one after another. Not creak, not sway, groan, like wooden bones shifting in their sleep. The first snowflake lands on your forehead. You look up expecting a flurry, but it's not quite snow. It's closer to icy pollen, crystalline and drifting, clinging to everything it touches without melting. It doesn't fall. It settles. You rub it between your fingers. It vanishes with a cold sting. And just ahead, across a narrow ravine lined with boulders and ancient cycads, you see movement. Low, cautious, huddled. Dinosaurs again. But smaller this time. These aren't the majestic hadrosaur herds of the endless day. These are Arctic survivors. Rough-coated, hunched, and wary. Their feathers are puffed. Their steps are tentative. Every motion is calculated. One lifts its snout, sniffing the air like a fox. You don't recognize the species at first, but the way they move, light-footed and coordinated, suggests dromaeosaurs. Raptors adapted to the cold. Think of them as the local night crew. They aren't here to dance. They're here to outlast. Odd fact. In the far north of Cretaceous Alaska, fossil sites have revealed troodontid small feathered theropods with massive eyes, possibly nocturnal. Their bone microstructure suggests they didn't migrate. They stayed, adapted, ate what they could, probably huddled for warmth, maybe even snuggled. You imagine them in makeshift nests under tree roots, sharing body heat, waiting for the sun that refused to return. Historians still debate how cold it actually got during the polar night. Some say freezing temperatures. Others believe the warmth from ocean currents kept the area temperate. But the presence of frost-sensitive flora and seasonal growth rings in dinosaur bones point to one fact: it wasn't cozy. You watch the dromaeosaurs pause at the edge of a frozen pond. One tests the ice with a claw, the others wait. They aren't taking risks, not tonight. You wonder what they're hunting. Not hadrosaurs, they've vanished, possibly into a valley below, or further south, or maybe into the dark itself. You decide to cross the ravine. Each step cracks frozen moss underfoot. A sound too loud. You wince. Even the trees seem to shush you. Halfway across, your foot sinks into a hidden pocket of slush. You stifle a yell and pull free, soaked to the knee. Your breath rasps. Your fingers tingle. Yeah, the cold is here now. You reach the other side and climb onto a patch of high ground. From this vantage, the forest spreads out like a prehistoric painting dappled with frost etched in blue light, entirely still. Except for the occasional flicker of movement. A raptor darting under a root, a shadow passing between tree trunks, a pair of gleaming eyes reflecting just a bit too much. This isn't their playground anymore, it's their test. And then across the valley you see it, a faint glow. Not sunlight, something else. You walk toward it, boots squelching quietly in the wet moss. The glow doesn't intensify, but it stays steady. When you reach it, you stop. It's a ring, not of prints, but of stones. Placed intentionally, arranged in a perfect circle half buried in frost and leaf litter. Each stone is roughly the same size, spaced evenly. In the center, a shallow depression filled with smooth bone fragments, bird bones, small reptiles, no hatchlings. You kneel beside it, breath fogging the air. A nesting site, but not active, long abandoned. The snow clings to your sleeves, your hair, your lashes. It's hard to feel your fingers, but still you sit unmoving as if waiting for something to return. You don't know what. Maybe the dancers. Maybe just a little more warmth. Or maybe just the sound of another heartbeat in the dark. The frost deepens. You feel it creep between your knuckles, stiffen your sleeves, and numb the tips of your ears. It doesn't rush in like a winter storm from the movies. No, this cold is patient. Old, experienced. It's the kind that wraps around you and makes no apologies. You either adjust or you leave. You rise from the nest site and begin to move again. Slowly. Carefully. Like the dinosaurs that once did the same. Every step makes a soft crunch against the frozen fern litter, and the trees draped in icy filaments begin to glisten. It's stunning, really. If this were any other time period, you'd probably set up a tripod and call it a magical winter hike. But there's nothing magical about this, because now you understand this is the part of the year where the swamp turns dangerous. It's no longer about dancing, it's about enduring. The swamp, for all its summer abundance, now tests its residents. The ones with endurance stay. The ones with fat stores, feathers, or luck survive. Everyone else. They fade into the mud one circle at a time. You stop near a cluster of cycads, ancient plants that look like someone tried to design a fern but got distracted halfway through. Their cones have split open from the cold, spilling seeds across the ground like cracked jewels. You lean closer. The smell hits you sweet, almost cinnamon-like, but tinged with rot. Not unpleasant, just complicated. And suddenly the air is full of it. This whole patch of forest reeks of warm spice and wet resin. It's intoxicating. You could almost believe someone was baking cookies nearby, if not for the silence. And the fact that you're 70 million years too early for ovens. Odd fact. Many Mesozoic plants produced aromatic compounds, not for humans obviously, but as part of defense or pollination strategies. And some of these smells preserved in amber still survive in trace amounts. Dinosaurs likely had strong olfactory senses. For some species, scent may have been their version of a compass. You sit down beside a tree trunk glazed with frozen sap, just breathing it in. You wonder how many dinosaurs navigated using these smells, not just to avoid danger but to return to places of comfort, to memories, to nests, to dances. Maybe scent marked the edge of the circle. Maybe that's how the juveniles knew when to stop turning. A branch cracks above you and a soft thwump lands nearby. You flinch. It's a bird. Wait, no, not quite a bird. Feathered, yes, but longer, leaner, with claws on its wings and eyes that reflect a light you didn't know was still around. Microraptor, or something like it. It hops once, then twice, and flutters to a lower branch just out of reach. It stares at you, not in fear, not in hunger. Curiosity. You hold your breath. The silence returns. Then the bird thing hops again onto the ground and begins pacing. In a circle. A tight, perfect loop. 3 steps turn. 3 steps turn. Over and over. You want to ask it why, but that would be silly. It stops after 10 loops. Stares at you again. Then lifts off into the canopy, vanishing with a rustle and a flurry of frost. You exhale stunned. Another circle, another ritual. How many species did this? How many passed it on? Could a behavior echo across lineages not through genes, but through imitation, like an ancient choreography that outlasted the dancers? You rise to your feet, knees stiff, breath visible. The air feels thicker now. Not colder, just heavier. Weighted with the presence of things unseen. You walk forward almost against your own will, pulled toward something just past the next ridge. The ground dips. You stumble into a gully, a shallow basin lined with broken branches and clusters of amber-colored mushrooms. The light down here has a golden glow, like someone turned on a flashlight through old honey. And in the middle of it all, a standing stone. Not a boulder, not a natural formation. A narrow spire of basalt, upright, weathered and marked with scratches. You step closer. The base is surrounded by more circles, faint overlapping prints, now half filled with ice. And around the spire, dozens of pine cones, arranged, not randomly, laid out like offerings. You blink. Could dinosaurs have placed them? It sounds absurd, but the spacing is too even, too regular. You think about bowerbirds, chimpanzees arranging rocks, elephants returning to bones. This was a site of something. Ritual memory direction. Historians still debate whether dinosaurs had spiritual awareness. Most say no, but those same historians once said dinosaurs were sluggish, cold-blooded brutes. And now we know they cared for their young. Migrated, vocalized, danced. Why not this? You reach out and touch the stone. It's warm, impossible. You press your palm flat against it. The heat is subtle, like sunlight trapped in a black coat. You have no explanation, just a sense of presence. You pull away, heart beating fast. Around you, the cinnamon scent thickens again. The wind dies. And somewhere in the distance, faint but distinct, you hear a stomp. Then another, a rhythm, coming back. You close your eyes and let it wash over you. It begins slowly. A faint thud. Then another. The tempo isn't consistent, more like a heartbeat working itself back into rhythm after too long in the cold. You stay still, eyes closed, letting the swamp speak first. Thud, 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 thud. Then silence again. You open your eyes. The standing stone remains exactly where it was, casting a long shadow over the frost-lined pine cones at its base. But the forest feels different now. Not warmer, but more awake. The ground under your boots vibrates ever so slightly, like a speaker turned too low to hear, but too strong to ignore. You step back from the stone, your breath visible in little gusts, and follow the pulse. The trees thicken ahead, clustered close together, like an audience gathering before a show. Their trunks are darker here, dusted in frost, their branches bare. You step through them one at a time, feeling like you're pushing deeper into a cathedral that nature forgot to finish. And then you hear it, a sound unlike anything else in the swamp. A sharp staccato bark. Not a predator's growl, not a warning, a statement. You freeze behind a tree trunk and peer into the clearing. There, standing tall in the golden half-light, is a troodontid, not skulking in shadows this time, not flitting behind leaves. Standing proud upright, its long tail counterbalancing as it rocks gently from side to side. Its feathers catch the dim light blue-black, with streaks of rust red, and its head tilts just slightly. Then it barks again. Kaya, short, forceful, followed by a slow turn. It begins to walk, a perfect circle. Again, you watch, barely daring to breathe. It isn't alone. From behind the brush emerge three more, one smaller than the rest, juvenile, its feathers puffed out like a down blanket. They follow. Each one barks once and then falls into step. They circle the same path, almost identical to the one the hadrosaurs followed earlier but scaled down. Where the big herbivores had left deep trenches in the earth, these feathered dancers leave light impressions in the snow-dusted peat. But the pattern is unmistakable. Another loop, another rehearsal, another mystery. Odd fact, troodontids had one of the largest brain-to-body ratios of any known dinosaur. Some researchers even believe they may have been the smartest non-avian dinos around. With large eyes adapted for low light and a strong sense of balance, they were likely nocturnal hunters. But watching them now, you'd think they were choreographers or poets. The little one stumbles mid-step. The lead adult stops, turns. They touch beaks gently. No scolding, just acknowledgement. Then they resume. You feel like you're watching an ancient family tradition being passed down. Not out of necessity, not for survival, but because this is what they do. They remember the circle. Historians still debate whether dinosaur social behaviors extended to teaching, but modern birds certainly do. Parental cranes guide their chicks through specific feeding sites. Crows demonstrate tool use. Even chickens have been shown to teach by example. So why not troodontids? The group completes 3 full rotations, then breaks off naturally. No cue, no fanfare, just a shared understanding. They vanish into the underbrush without a single backward glance. You exhale, then glance down at your own boots. You're standing in the edge of their ring now. Part of the pattern. A brief interruption in a tradition older than mammoths, older than flight, older than reason. And just when you think the moment's passed, the wind shifts again. This time from the south. Warmer, damp. The cinnamon scent returns, but this time mixed with something sharper like pine needles crushed underfoot. You follow the wind. It leads you past a dry creek bed now rimmed with frozen mud, down a slope littered with moss-covered stones, through an arch of conifers so perfectly bent that for a moment you wonder if something built them that way. Then you see it. A wide open clearing. Sunlight, real. Sunlight breaks through the canopy in a single golden beam. It hits the center of the clearing, illuminating another ring. Larger than before. Not footprints, not stone. Feathers, laid in a near-perfect circle. Orange, gray, blue. Large flight feathers, each placed tip to base curving like the edge of a galaxy. A spiral that draws the eye inward. You don't move. You don't breathe. Whoever made this is long gone, or very close. You glance around, but the forest is still. No troodontid, no dromaeosaur, just the wind, the light, and this feathered sigil, left in the earth like a question with no language. Why a circle? Why over and over? Maybe it was more than habit. Maybe it was memory. Maybe instinct. Or something stranger still. Some ancient code written in loops and echoes. You kneel beside the feather ring. They're not fresh, but they haven't decayed either. Preserved by cold and stillness. Each one is placed with such care it feels deliberate, as if they were left for someone, you, or maybe just whoever was next. You feel the cold creep back in again gently this time, like a hand on your shoulder, reminding you that the dance isn't over. Not yet, because somewhere in the woods a new rhythm is starting. You just haven't heard it yet. You don't know when you started crying. It isn't loud, nothing dramatic, Just a quiet wetness at the edge of your eyes, the kind you get when a piece of music hits a little too close to whatever it is you're holding in. But here, kneeling beside a spiral made of feathers in the middle of a freezing Arctic swamp, it makes perfect sense. Because it's not just the cold, it's the pattern. Everywhere you've walked, whether it was footprints, claw marks, stone rings, or dances, it's always been the same message: circle, spiral, loop. And now that message has a new form. Bones. You don't see them at first. The feathers distract you. But when you brush a few aside with shaking fingers, you feel the shape. Long, smooth, hollow. The kind of bone that once held breath. It's a rib, or part of one. And then you see more vertebrae curved and stacked like beads. A pelvic bone cracked but intact, all placed not in a pile but in a curve. You freeze. You are kneeling in what may have once been a burial ring, a circle of death. But not chaotic, not violent, arranged. You step back slowly, careful not to disturb anything further, not out of fear, out of respect. It's one thing to imagine dinosaurs lived in herds, made sounds, showed affection. But this is ceremony. You pace the outer edge, noting how the bones arc inward. Not dumped, not scattered. The vertebrae curl like a sleeping animal, or like someone laid them that way, spine first folding the past into the earth. Historians still debate whether non-human animals understand death beyond instinct. Elephants have been observed revisiting the bones of their relatives, stroking them with their trunks. Chimpanzees mourn. Crows gather in silence. Is this what you found, a dinosaur mourning ground? Or something even older? A place not of sadness but transformation. The mist begins to roll in again. Not heavy, gentle like breath over glass. It curls around the feather ring, blurs the edges of the bones. And suddenly, it hits you. This isn't a grave. It's a map. The way the bones curve inward. The positioning of feathers. The subtle spiral pattern etched in the earth around it. This isn't random. It's navigational. Directional. Like someone or something was trying to say, go this way, turn, return, begin again. You sit at the edge and try to follow the pattern with your eyes. Your fingers trace the loops in the soil. The feather tips the curve of a fibula, now soft with a lichen. You feel like you're reading a language your body understands better than your brain. Maybe that's the whole point. Odd fact. Some indigenous Arctic cultures build Inuksuk stone markers shaped like humans or arrows to guide travelers through the tundra. They're silent wayfinders, messages left by the living for the not yet arrived. This feels like that. But instead of stone, it's memory made tangible. The sun vanishes again behind cloud cover. The temperature dips. A light snow begins to fall, not hard, just persistent. Dusting the clearing with a thin layer of frost. You don't move. You want to stay here forever. But something changes. A sound different from before. A click, followed by a scrape. You rise and turn. A creature stands at the edge of the clearing. Not tall, maybe waist height. Feathered but ragged. Its eyes glow faintly in the snowlight. It watches you still, and silent breath rising in thin puffs from its nostrils. It steps forward once, then stops, and slowly, deliberately begins to walk the edge of the feather circle. Not through it, around it, clockwise, then counterclockwise. 3 full loops. Then it stops, looks at you, tilts its head, and vanishes into the trees. You're left alone again, but not empty. Something inside you has been rewired. The swamp isn't just a setting. It's a character. It doesn't speak in words. It speaks in returns. Circles of movement, circles of life, circles of bones and feathers and frost. And if you're paying attention, it's all still turning. You step away from the ring. Head low, arms tucked close to your body, and walk back into the trees. You don't know where you're going, but you have a feeling you've been there before. You wander now, not out of curiosity, but out of momentum, carried forward by the spiral rhythms that have carved themselves into your senses. You walk because that's what everything else here has done. The hadrosaurs, the troodontids, The wind, the patterns in the dirt, none of it moves in straight lines. You've stopped looking for explanations. Now you just observe. It's late or early or neither. You've lost all sense of clock time, but your body knows the difference between a warm swamp and a cold one, and it tells you plainly things are shifting. Deep winter's breath is coming. And fast. Your boots crunch across frozen roots as you come upon a new clearing. This one is shallower, ringed by small boulders and what looks like the remains of low shrubs. A strange scoop depression forms the center, a kind of bowl in the earth. And in that bowl, you find something unexpected. Tiny tracks. So many that they blur together. They overlap in chaotic clusters, at first then resolve into loops, spirals, arcs. The prints are three-toed delicate, some with a faint tail drag behind them. Juvenile dinosaurs, maybe hatchlings. You crouch low, brushing frost from the top layer. The prints are fresh, hours old at most. Whoever left them is still nearby. You stare at the swirl of trails. They aren't random. They're repetitive, intentional. Small feet pacing in circles again, with the circles around a central point. And then you see a patch of disturbed soil in the center of the bowl, flattened, lightly scored, and scattered with shell fragments. You are standing in a juvenile dance pit. It hits you like a soft thump to the ribs. Hatchlings may have learned the circle before they learned to feed. Historians still debate whether behavior in dinosaurs was instinctual or taught. But modern birds and reptiles often exhibit social learning and even play. Crows play games with sticks. Young cranes mimic their parents' mating dances just for fun. So maybe, just maybe, the circles started young. You imagine it, hatchlings tumbling from their eggs, blinking into the permanent dusk of polar day. No sun to chase, no shadows to fear, just the rhythmic thud of adult feet nearby. And so they mimic it. They circle, they echo, and the echoes become tradition. You pick up a small fragment of eggshell. It's thin, delicate, mottled with pale blue flecks. The scent here is different, less resin, more soil. Wet peat, pungent, raw, like the aftermath of something urgent, birth maybe, or growth. A light shuffling noise behind you. You turn, slowly. A juvenile hadrosaur peeks out from behind a boulder. It's about the size of a pony with downy feathers rimming its back like a fuzzy blanket. Its head crest is underdeveloped, a gentle ridge, rather than the grand trumpet some of its elders wear. Its eyes are wide, curious. You freeze not because you're afraid, but because you don't want to ruin this. The juvenile steps forward. Its feet land softly, leaving new imprints that overlap the old ones. It walks to the center of the pit, looks around, and then it begins. A slow turn. One circle, then another. It's clumsy. The turns are wide, uneven. It bumps a stone and squeaks high-pitched and surprised. But then it corrects, refocuses. Thump, thump, pause, thump. The pattern is there. This creature isn't running, isn't foraging. It's practicing. Odd fact. Some modern birds rehearse flight before their wings are strong enough. They flap in bursts, hop across branches, or mimic the gestures of adults. And some, like mannequin birds, actually perform juvenile courtship dances that improve with time. This hadrosaur is no different. You stay still and let the creature finish. It makes 5 full turns, then stops and looks at you again. A strange moment passes. Then a call echoes from the trees, a low, distant honk. Adult. The juvenile perks up, blinks twice, and gallops off into the mist with surprising grace. Gone. You're left with a dozen fresh prints and a strong urge to sit down, which you do. Right there in the center of the pit, surrounded by hatchling loops and frozen pine cones and shards of egg. You close your eyes and try to remember something. Something circular. Your childhood. A backyard sprinkler. A tire swing. Yes movement. Shared movement, a kind of joy without language. You wonder if that's what the hatchlings felt. Not instinct, not performance, just joy. And maybe, just maybe, that's how the circle began. You rise slowly, bones aching, and retrace the outer ring with your steps. The frost crackles underfoot, but you try to step where the juveniles stepped. Keep their rhythm. Let your feet carry what theirs began. You walk one circle, then two. You're not sure what you're honoring, but it feels right. You step out of the pit and back into the trees. Behind you, the loops are already fading in the snow, but you know where they lead. The trees thicken again. You find yourself moving through a corridor of trunks so tall and close together, they nearly blot out the last light from above. The ground beneath your feet softens not snow now, but damp moss, springy and silent. It's darker here, deeper. You don't need to see to feel the shift. The swamp is changing tone. Then you hear it. A low hum, not from an animal, from the trees. You stop, listen. It's subtle, so subtle you might miss it if you hadn't just spent hours attuning your ears to the quiet. But it's there. A kind of resonance, not a melody, more like pressure or breath. You place your hand on a trunk. The vibration is faint but real, like a tuning fork just after it's struck. At first you think it must be wind, but the air is still. The mist hangs like gauze. The forest isn't moving, and yet something hums. You press your ear to the bark. It's real. The trees are singing. Odd fact, trees do vibrate. Wind passes through their canopies and sets up subtle oscillations in their trunks. Some researchers have studied this tree music, even turned it into audio like slow-motion whale songs. But here in this ancient Arctic forest, the song is different. It's slower, deeper. It doesn't come in gusts. It flows, like breath held for millions of years. And you begin to wonder, what if this hum was part of the dance? What if the dinosaurs didn't just move to rhythms of their own making, but to those of the forest itself? You walk further into the grove, letting your fingers trail across bark slick with frost. Each trunk you pass hums at a slightly different pitch. Together they form chords, dissonant, then harmonious, then gone. You close your eyes. The dance makes more sense now. The loops, the circles. Maybe they weren't just about territory or mating or warmth. Maybe they were responses to the trees, to this constant slow-motion symphony. And not just the hadrosaurs. You pause at the edge of a shallow stream frozen into ribbons. The water glimmers beneath a thin sheet of ice, capturing the distorted reflections of overhead branches. Across the stream you see claw marks, deep ones, raked down a wide-trunked tree. Too high for a troodontid, too low for a big theropod. Something in between. And then you notice something stranger still. The grooves in the tree aren't wild or desperate. They're spaced, regular, musical. 5 gashes. Pause. Then 3. Pause. Then 5 again. Historians still debate whether such marks were communication or coincidence. Were they warnings, territory markers, or did they have rhythm? You run a hand over the grooves. They're smooth at the edges, not fresh but not eroded, preserved by cold and resin and a lack of trampling feet. You tap them lightly. They ring. Just slightly. Just enough. You smile. Somewhere out there, a dinosaur might have stood here tapping this exact sequence with a claw, or a tail or a horn. Not for alarm, not for combat. For rhythm. For company. It's not so crazy. Woodpeckers drum. Beavers slap water, and gorillas beat their chests in specific cadences. The natural world has always made music. It's only humans who try to define it. You walk deeper still, drawn toward the densest part of the grove. The trees here are twisted, grown close together at the base, their roots braided in wide circles. You step between them. The clearing inside is perfect. Circular, of course. No snow here. The canopy is too thick, just moss. And at the center, a fallen log split lengthwise like a natural bench. On it, 3 stones, flat, spaced evenly, scarred with claw marks. You sit. Let your hands rest on the wood. You can feel it vibrate just slightly. The hum is strongest here. You lean back and close your eyes. And then it happens. Not a vision, not a memory, a sensation. You feel yourself being guided, not dragged, not pushed, but nudged gently into stillness. You picture the trees swaying in harmony with hadrosaurs circling below. You hear the footfalls, the deep blasts of crests, the sharp calls of troodontids weaving around trunks. You see loops, spirals, rings, and always beneath it's all the steady hum of trees. The forest wasn't the backdrop. It was the metronome. Odd fact. Some fungi living in symbiosis with trees can transmit signals, underground chemical pulses that in some ways behave like synapses, like a nervous system, a forest that feels. Maybe they felt the dancers, echoed their steps, remembered. You rise slowly and step back into the clearing. The hum fades with each step, but you carry it now. The dance isn't just something you watched. It's something you've joined. The forest begins to thin. Not dramatically, just enough that you can see a bit more sky, though. Sky is a generous term for what hangs overhead now. It's not black. It's not blue. It's gray. Perpetual woolen gray, the kind that sits heavy and unmoving like an ancient lid over this part of the earth. You walk slowly, not because you're tired, though you are, but because hurrying would feel wrong. The ground beneath you is soft again. Moss over peat, ancient roots woven together. Each step leaves an impression that rebounds a few seconds later, as if the earth is breathing you in. The trees give way to a rise, and as you climb it, you see it laid out before you, a broad circular depression in the land. A shallow bowl lined with muddy soil and ferns trying to hold on to color. Within that ring, fossils, dozens of them. Some bones lie loose, others half buried like teeth half pulled from the gums of the earth. Long ribs, pelvises, vertebrae, a partial skull beaked and cracked the eye socket filled with frost. But it's not a graveyard, it's a spiral. The bones aren't in a heap, they're arranged. You descend into the basin cautiously, boots sinking slightly with each step. The arrangement becomes clearer the closer you get. Vertebrae form concentric loops like ripples in a still pond. Ribs fan outward in delicate arcs. You count at least 3 separate skeletons, each one placed with baffling precision. Historians still debate the meaning of fossil beds like these. Some say they're flood deposits where carcasses were swept and arranged by currents. Others suggest predators dragged bones into patterns. But here, now, none of that feels right. Because there's no chaos in this place, only choreography. You sit gently beside one ribcage, brushing frost from its curve. It's lighter than it looks, fragile, like it might sigh if you pressed too hard. And you realize this wasn't just a gathering place, it was a place of return. Odd fact. Some migratory birds return to the exact same nesting ground every year, even after long journeys across continents. Sea turtles too, even insects. Monarch butterflies navigate thousands of miles using cues we still barely understand. Maybe dinosaurs did the same. Maybe they didn't just return to feed or mate or raise their young, but to remember or to honor. You stand and trace the spiral again with your steps, following the way the vertebrae twist inward. It leads you to the center of the basin where a single stone sits upright in the dirt, not tall, not grand, but deliberate, marked. You crouch and run your fingers across the surface. It's been scratched claws likely. Or horn. The grooves are too irregular to be human, too patterned to be natural. Not letters, but not nonsense. Symbols. Historians still debate whether non-avian dinosaurs had symbolic behavior. There's no direct evidence, no cave art, no etched bones with stories. But you've seen too much to dismiss the possibility now. Even if this was no more than an animal dragging its claws in a moment of boredom, it left a message. I was here, I walked, I turned, I stayed. You lie back in the dirt beside the stone, looking up into the gray above. From this low angle, the edges of the basin ring you like an amphitheater. You imagine the dancers moving around you first, the hadrosaurs heavy and deliberate, their footfalls soft and resonant. Then, the troodontids light and nimble, weaving between prints, mimicking what they could. Then the juveniles tumbling, learning, Then the predators, watching, circling, not striking, just present. Everyone part of the rhythm. No hierarchy, no conquest, just movement. Historians still debate whether this was instinct or ritual. But what if the two are the same? What if instinct is ritual repeated often enough to become sacred? Your eyes close, not because you're sleeping, but because you want to listen better. The ground hums beneath you. A distant footfall, a drumbeat you'll never hear with ears alone. Maybe this is how the swamp remembers through vibration echo loop. Maybe this is how the dancers stay alive. Not in bones, but in circles. You sit up slowly. The cold is creeping back again. Deeper this time, the kind that doesn't negotiate. You need to move. But before you go, you reach out and place your palm flat against the stone. A pulse. Or maybe your own. You rise, step carefully over the ribs, and leave the spiral behind. It doesn't vanish. It never vanishes. The spiral keeps turning even when no one is there to see it. Even when the dancers are dust. You're walking now with no destination, just a direction outward. Back into the trees which have begun to change again. Not visibly, no. They still arch above you tall and hunched thick, with bark and frost and memory. But their song is different now. Softer, slower, like a lullaby winding down. The hum you once felt in your feet now dances only faintly at the edge of perception, as if the forest is gently lowering the volume, telling you it's almost time. You stop near a patch of ferns that have curled in on themselves, dusted with white. Above them, a branch sags under the weight of melting ice, its droplets landing in perfect rhythm. Plunk, pause, plunk. You look down and find, you guessed it, another circle. A ring of stones no larger than coins, half buried, forming a loop in the moss. Inside, nothing. Just a stillness that feels deliberate. And you smile, because now you understand. The circles are not meant to be solved, not dissected like a puzzle. They are meant to be felt. You sit beside the ring, tucking your knees up, letting the cold seep in because it doesn't hurt anymore. It simply is. The kind of cold that makes you alert, aware, alive. You close your eyes, and the swamp comes back. You hear the soft honks of hadrosaurs moving like music notes through the mist. The feathered flurry of troodontids flitting between shadows. The rhythmic stomps echoing beneath your ribs like a drum so old it doesn't care who hears it anymore. You see the hatchlings looping in chaos that eventually finds order. You see the bones spun into spirals, not discarded but offered. And you see the forest, always the forest, humming its slow song, not as a backdrop, but as a collaborator. Because this place isn't just where dinosaurs danced. It's why they danced. To remember. To return. To be seen. Even if only by each other. You open your eyes again. And in the fading light you see the last detail. Your own footprints. Circling the basin. Forming yet another loop. You didn't even notice you were doing it. But of course you were. Of course. Because the rhythm got in your bones. And now it will stay there. You rise, stretch your limbs, and take one final step outside the ring. Not away from it. Just around. The swamp doesn't wave goodbye. It doesn't need to. It keeps spinning and pulsing and remembering. And if you ever return, if anyone ever does, it'll be here. Waiting. Looping. Humming in circles. Forever. The Arctic swamp where dinosaurs once danced in circles is more than a prehistoric oddity. It's a rhythm etched into the memory of the earth. In this 16,000-word journey, you step into a world of loops and spirals where hadrosaurs sway through mist to infrasonic hums, where troodontids mimic with feathered grace, and even the hatchlings learn their first lessons by circling sacred ground. Across every frozen basin and resin-scented clearing, you find that the language of this land is motion repetition, not out of confusion but out of intention. From the rhythmic vibrations in the soil to the musical groans of creaking trees, the environment becomes an instrument, and the dinosaurs, its dancers. The swamp is not static. It shifts with season from humid twilight to a brittle cold that cracks pine cones like knuckles. And yet, even in death spirals of bones, feather rings, and ritual scratches carved into ancient bark, everything moves in circles. The purpose, still debated, mating, migration, mourning, or something more symbolic. But the message is clear: these weren't mindless creatures stumbling through the dark. They were participants in an unspoken choreography that stretched beyond instinct and deep into the sacred. And as you walk these same paths, your steps, hesitant at first, become part of that memory. You came looking for footprints. You leave understanding the dance.